Continuing with our analysis of the State of the Nation address, particularly in terms of youth issues, a focus now on youth unemployment, which is a long-standing reality in South Africa. You hear how study issues might be feeding into that. The country needs to critically address the issue of youth unemployment in order to meet developmental and economic goals. We're going to take a closer look at the President's SONA and his priorities on youth employment and small business development now. Joining us is Lethiwe Nkosi, a network mobiliser at Youth Capital, which is a campaign advocating for youth unemployment solutions that are evidence-based and youth-centred. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. I love the mention of evidence-based. Tell us, what is the data and what can we learn from it when it comes to truly ensuring an improvement in youth employment?
So thank you for having me. What we have learned as Youth Capital, in fact, research tells us that 9.1 million young people are not in education, employment, nor training. And this tells us that the issue of youth unemployment is not simply an issue around the need for jobs, but it's also an issue of young people not being able to even access those jobs because they're not able to complete their studies and the qualifications they need in order to start working. We also know that there are other roadblocks young people encounter on their journey to becoming economically productive, like the issue of the cost of looking for work. So a young person who graduated last year is confronted with, for example, the cost of transport to travel to look for work. So there are various challenges that young people encounter, and they have been exacerbated by the couple of years that we've experienced of COVID-19.
Lethiwe Nkosi, thanks for your time. I think interesting to have this conversation just hot on the heels of having spoken about some of the issues with NSFAS and monies for registrations this year. I suppose businesses are one way to remedy where young people aren't able to go through training, whether it's at a university or a TVET college or other kinds of institutions. The President saying, for example, that the employment tax incentive was being expanded to try and coax businesses into bringing in young people. In your experience, in your work, when does and doesn't businesses bringing in young people actually lead to proper employment improvements and skills development?
In our conversations with small and medium sized business owners, we spoke to them last year. In fact, we published a publication from the research that we did and the conversations we had, and we learned that businesses, small and medium enterprise owners, are keen on hiring young people, but there are challenges that go over and above, the challenge of funding. Yes, the expanded, the employment tax incentive is a good tool to encourage employers to hire young people, but there are other hidden costs that employers experience when it comes to hiring young people. For example, many small and medium enterprises do not have the capacity to train a young person, and not only in the hard skills. So hard skills are important for business owners. They need young people to have been trained at a TVET college, for example, but it's also the cost around being able to onboard a young person. Many small and medium-sized enterprises do not have the capacity, the human resource to train up young people. So those costs are not factored in what the President described in the kind of support that small and medium enterprises will receive. And on the note of skills, what we've learned from employers as well is that there isn't a clear coordination in terms of a clear pipeline of the kind of skills young people need, get while at a college, the skills skills in the market. So there's a disconnect between the skills that a young person acquires while at a TVET college and actually what is required in the market. And that disconnect needs to be looked at. We need to ensure that young people are adequately equipped with the skills that are needed in the market, and so that there's a clear pipeline from when a young person completes their studies at a TVET college and when they are employed by a small and medium enterprise. One last thing to say on the note of skills, we cannot turn a blind eye on the fact that there was a decrease in the number of young people who wrote their final year exam at TVET colleges last year. So yes, it may be a good target to have 30,000 young people enrolled at TVET colleges. However, they need to complete their studies. They need to be able to write the exam and get their qualification. So a lot of work needs to be done in terms of what happens at a TVET college in equipping young people, as well as there needs to be a connection to employers so they can hire those young people, and those employers also need to be supported.
All the nuts and bolts you're talking about there, that with that mention of a pipeline between TVET college qualification and indeed getting students to complete their courses and write exams and then move into the workplace. So we've spoken about the business sector and businesses bringing in young people, but I suppose there's also a role here for government, although the public sector wage bill negotiations may show some of the potential pitfalls of hiring people en masse down the line. The Department of Home Affairs, we heard from the President, has appointed a first cohort of 10,000 unemployed youngsters to digitize more than 340 million paper-based civic records. One wonders what the details of what that involves, if it's using scanners or perhaps something where there's scope for some real skills development. Are those kinds of measures a long-term solution here potentially for young people looking to gain skills and work experience?
It's a start. As Youth Capital, we firmly believe that when a young person is a part of a public employment opportunity like the one that you have described, they need to acquire not only the skills for the job in front of them, but also transferable skills that they can use post the program, because we know that these are opportunities, they're not full-term employment. So when a young person completes the program, they need to be able to stay employed, and one of the key ways that can happen is if they receive transferable skills. So the hope is that, a young person who is employed to be part of the opportunity linked to Home Affairs will get the digital skills required in the digital sector, so they can work for a digital company post the program ending.
We're very short on time, but I'd like to ask you just in closing, since it is a Friday afternoon after all, if you have one case study, one individual who comes to mind who you think is a sort of emblem of the best of what can happen when there is proper youth skills development and employment work, perhaps in your own experience.
There are quite a number of examples, but I think I would like to stay away from the exception narrative, yes. Because I understand that there are very nuances, there are different nuances that young people experience. I mean, there are a number of young people in our network who have been able to complete their schooling and pursue careers or even start their own businesses, but I don't want to put emphasis on that lest we, then become complacent as a society.
Yes.
And most
Absolutely fair. A very astute point to not go with the exceptionalism, but look at the systemic problems that need tackling. Lethiwe and Nkosi there, Network Mobiliser for Youth Capital. Thank you very much for your input this afternoon.